Will the Crimson Tide sign a quarterback in the 2026 recruiting class? It looks as if they desperately want to, and I will talk about two 2026 signal callers who Alabama recently put offers out to. I will also talk about a couple of guys I've had an opportunity to travel and catch up with over the last couple of weeks on this episode of The Process. I am Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting and Managing Editor here at Touch Alabama, the host of The Process, where we break down the latest in Alabama football recruiting news. And this episode will be absolutely no different. I will talk about those quarterbacks and the Crimson Tide's 2026 quarterback recruiting efforts as a whole. But let's dive right into those guys. First, four-star quarterback Jett Tamala. He's a kid who is currently verbally committed to Iowa State, but he currently lines up at his high school in Nebraska in terms of Millard South High School in Omaha, Nebraska. Threw for 3,664 yards, 47 touchdowns while completing 70% of his passes during the 2024 high school football season. This is a guy, when you turn on his film, with his ability to push the ball down the field, that's probably the first thing that jumps out. His ability, looks if he's throwing the football on the rope when he is pushing the ball down the field on those deep routes, whether it is the corner route, hitting this receiver up the seam, hitting his receivers on those non-routes out wide. He looks really, really impressive doing that. Also looks really, really impressive when he's called upon to evade defenders, keeps his eyes downfield when extending plays and making great throws when pressure's coming from everywhere. Then he has to make these exciting plays when a play is breaking down. Like I said, he's verbally committed to Iowa State at the moment, but he's a guy the Crimson Tide wants to take a look at. I think he's more quick than fast. I think you see that when he's evading pressure, getting busy in the pocket, when he's keeping his eyes down the field. But when he's called upon to basically escape the pocket and make plays with his feet in terms of getting north and south, he doesn't look like a kid who's like particularly slow, like he's not mobile. He's a guy who can get mobile, as he's able, like I said, really makes a lot of good throws when he's pushing it down the field in terms of his touch on the football, hitting the seam route. Once again, he is one of the Crimson Tide's newest quarterback targets, like I said at the beginning of this video. And Alabama looks like they desperately, like I said, desperately want to add a 2026 quarterback after signing Keelan Russell during the 2025 recruiting cycle. But before I dive deeper into the recruiting efforts as a whole, I do want to talk about another 2026 quarterback the Crimson Tide actually offered on Thursday. I'm going to talk about Matt Ponatowski, a four-star quarterback who the Crimson Tide are now going to take a look at as well. He's a guy who's a product of Ohio. And when I take a look at his film, I think one of the first things that stands out to me is the ability to make just a wide range of throws. You're going to see him hit the slant route, basically rip it through coverage. You're going to see him be able to hit his receiver in that tight window when the defensive split is playing a cover two, and he has to fit the ball between the safety and the cornerback. He actually going to make that throw a couple of different times. You see him hit the seam route as well. So the moment I turn on this film, you'll see him hit a dig route coming across the field as well. So the moment I turn on this film, I say, yo, this kid is just making a different array of throws when I turn on this film. And I always like to see that out of a quarterback. The first thing that you're going to see when I talk about a quarterback or I'm evaluating a quarterback, I'm going to say, yo, can this kid make all of the throws? Because I feel like that is the baseline when you're considering a guy to be a quarterback prospect, but makes him elite if he can do it on a consistent basis and do it at a very high level and just consistently do it. And I think that's just something that makes a really, really good quarterback prospect. When you take a look at Matt's film, he does that quite a bit, but he's a guy who's not verbally committed to any program at the moment. So the Crimson Tide are going to try to make a push for him in this 2026 recruiting class, which goes back to what I talked about, I feel like probably a couple of months ago at this point in time, in terms of where the Crimson Tide are in this 2026 recruiting cycle. They do not have a quarterback committed at the moment after signing Keelan Russell. It is oftentimes hard to sign a quarterback right after you sign a really elite quarterback a year before, simply because a lot of guys just want to play early possibly, or some guys just want a path to play probably junior year, possibly sophomore year. And if Russell is there, a guy who is coming behind him is possibly looking at I want probably have an opportunity to play to my junior year. I know some people may feel some type of way about that, or probably don't feel great about that, about the way that some kids are looking at that because of the current college football landscape. But that's just the landscape we're in today with NIL, and everybody wants to go to the NFL, and a lot of people don't want to wait. A lot of people want to get an opportunity to get on field as soon as possible. This is just the nature of the game, and currently what we are dealing with in terms of us evaluating and looking at the game of college football as a whole. So I just think it's just the nature of the game. I think this is the way a lot of kids are looking at it, not just at the quarterback position, at a lot of different positions in this current college football landscape. But the Crimson Tide do not have a quarterback here in this 2026 recruiting class, and some may even think like, yo, do they really need a quarterback in this 2026 class? There's a legit possibility that Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell all could be back in Tuscaloosa on next season. I think that is a legit possibility, but it's also a legit possibility that you could lose one or two of those guys by the end of the 2025 football season. Ty Simpson could have a great year where he moves on to the NFL. Those other two guys behind him, Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, can battle it out. Whoever wins it, the loser could enter the transfer portal. You have one quarterback in your quarterback recruiting room, which quarterback room as a whole, which is something Alabama does not want. Of course, there's so many different scenarios that could happen in terms of just different things. For example, if Ty Simpson comes back, does a Keelan Russell or Austin Mack transfer, you don't have two quarterbacks in your room. You're going to want to have another quarterback there. So I think the Crimson Tide are going after these quarterbacks, one, because I feel like they do feel that these guys are talented quarterbacks who could produce in their system, and they feel that they can develop these guys into great quarterbacks in Tuscaloosa. But I also feel they need a quarterback for an insurance policy, just based on you never know what could happen in today's era of college football. You never know who's going to enter the transfer portal. You're never going to know who's going to move on to the NFL, or how great of a season a guy like Ty Simpson can have. A guy like Austin Mack, if he does win a quarterback competition, does he move on to the NFL if he has a stellar career? So there's so many different things that Alabama's coaching staff has to consider that could possibly happen, and that's why they probably are taking the safe route and trying to add a 2026 quarterback. Now looking at these two guys here in this 2026 recruiting class, guys who are going to become their top targets because they are the guys who they recently offered. The guys they previously offered, the Crimson Tide, looked as if they was basically out of the running for all of those guys, with Derek Zammit being the latest guy who they were really recruiting, but he committed to another program out there. The Crimson Tide looked as if they really wanted to add him at some point in this 2026 recruiting class. So that is the whole breakdown I wanted to give of the Crimson Tide's 2026 recruiting efforts. They really want to add a guy here in this class, and the guys that they just offered, Tamala and also Matt Panatowski, I think they're going to give those guys some good looks and try to get them on campus and see if they can affect their recruitment in terms of possibly flipping the Iowa State commit and try to get him to Tuscaloosa. But we'll see how that plans out and what those guys' plans are for the future. But moving forward to another position, stepping away from the quarterback room, we're going to talk about five-star linebacker Xavier Griffin, who recently decommitted from USC. The Crimson Tide are set to host him for an official visit during the summer. He looked to have been in a really solid position with them because he attends Gainesville High School in Georgia, where he's actually a native of Alabama, grew up in the Huntsville, Alabama area. So he really is a guy who grew up in Alabama fans. A lot of his family grew up Alabama fans because, like I said, they are from Alabama. But in terms of what this kid brings to the table, he's that hybrid linebacker, just perfect example. We talk about so many people like that on recent episode of The Process, like Nick Abrams and Braden Roos out of Georgia. Two other guy, Braden Roos out of Georgia, him and Xavier Griffin are Georgia products, but Nick Abrams is out of Maryland, of course. But they are all these hybrid type of linebackers. Griffin can rush from the edge. He can drop back in coverage. He can play sideline to sideline. He can do a lot of the things that you want your inside linebacker to do in today's era of college football. I had an opportunity to see Gainesville High School take on Moody at the beginning of the 2024 football season, and Griffin was really impressive. And it's kind of like the film that you guys are seeing right now on your screen. He's a guy who can bend the edge, like I said, play sideline to sideline, get physical, turn speed into power. He's a guy who has everything you want, like I said, have a linebacker prospect. The Crimson Tide will get him on campus for that official visit. I think Alabama's in a really solid position with them. A great official visit could really seal things up for Alabama in terms of possibly landing Xavier Griffin. His teammate is already verbally committed to Alabama, another native of Huntsville, Alabama, and Jamarian Matthews. So we'll see what role that plays in Griffin's recruitment. Had a recent opportunity to get out to Benjamin Russell High School in Alexander City, Alabama, and check on five-star wide receiver Cadarian Morgan. And whoa, that kid was crazy impressive at practice. He did not drop a single pass. In terms of the throws that were made to him, I thought some throws were kind of not the most accurate throws, but he just went and got him. He's a type of wide receiver who's going to build so much trust in his future quarterback. Whenever that quarterback is in trouble, you're going to go to a guy like Cadarian Morgan, a 6'5" physical wide receiver, looked like he was built in a lab, can run all of the routes, really explosive, a guy who looks the part. And just take a look at him at practice. You saw that kid at practice, you was like, yo, it's not easy to tell who's a five-star wide receiver here at Benjamin Russell High School. That's how special Cadarian Morgan was at that practice. Really smooth route runner, can get out of his release really effectively for a guy his size. Had opportunity to catch up with him after that practice, and he said, of course, he will officially visit the Crimson Tide. Has a July 2nd commitment date. Please sure to check out an interview with Cadarian Morgan as well when talking about the Crimson Tide. He told me that he feels Alabama has a winning tradition. The receivers that come through there have been great at the college level and in the league. And then Coach Shep, as a receiver coach, he's one of the best to do it. The energy he brings makes me want to go hard every day. So he has a great relationship with Alabama's wide receiver coach, Jamarcus Shepard. Really respects the program being an in-state kid. So the Crimson Tide are in a great position with Morgan at the moment, but I think his recruitment could get a little bit interesting based on how his official visits planned out. He recently took an official visit to Colorado, spoke very highly of the Buffaloes program. He's going to get on the campus of Auburn University, and this is a program where his former teammate plays at, and Malcolm Simmons. He has a great relationship with Cam Coleman, a lot of the young wide receivers in an Auburn wide receiver room. So those are just two teams I find very, very interesting when it comes to Cadarian Morgan. Like I said, the Crimson Tide are in a really, really good position with them, but those schools are going to try to make it as difficult as possible for Cadarian Morgan in terms of when he announces that decision on July 2nd. The last guy I want to talk about in this episode of The Process is Kamaran Johnson. I had an opportunity to see him at Muscle Shoals High School when they took on Austin in that spring game on a Thursday, and he was really impressive. I'm talking about a guy who I think is one of the more versatile defensive linemen in this 2026 recruiting class. He's a guy who can rush from the edge. He's a guy who can play with his hands in the ground as well, possibly be a guy who plays more so in the interior of the defense line to the next level. The Crimson Tide like him at the bandit role, but they are also open to him playing more so in the interior of their defensive line in terms of him being a defensive end or nose tackle when it comes to their defensive scheme at 4-2-5 defensive scheme that Kane Womack likes to run in Tuscaloosa. So in terms of Kamaran Johnson, he's verbally committed to the Crimson Tide, of course, committed to Alabama on A-Day. Still feels really good about his commitment to Alabama, but he will take official visits to other programs as Alabama continues to be heavily involved, along with Auburn, Ole Miss, and Miami. Has an official visit locked in with Alabama and also has an official locked in with Miami. So other teams are going to continue to push Kamaran Johnson. I like this kid for so many different reasons. I think his versatility is one of the main reasons, just his ability to play probably every position along the defensive front at the next level. Alabama's defensive line coach Freddie Roach was in attendance for that spring game, so they really want to keep Kamaran Johnson's commitment locked in. But that's basically everything I wanted to talk about on this episode of The Process. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube channel. Be sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button as well. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. As always, I am Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting and Managing Editor here at Touchdown Alabama. Process.